Power rarely appears weakest when it begins to lose control. In most governments, the first sign of strain is not disorder, but delay. Orders continue moving through ministries. Laws remain enforceable. Revenue still enters the treasury. Public ceremonies continue with familiar precision. Yet beneath this outward continuity, response itself begins to narrow. Information arrives more slowly. Decisions pass through more layers of protection. Officials become cautious not because authority has disappeared, but because preserving authority has become the central administrative task. Institutions under pressure often remain capable of action long after they begin losing the ability to adapt. That distinction shaped some of the most consequential periods in political history. Systems rarely react too late because danger was invisible. More often they react too late because every response threatens the legitimacy required to maintain control while the pressure is still unfolding. By the late 18th century, the French monarchy still governed one of the largest and most administratively developed states in Europe. Louis XVI remained recognized as sovereign across the kingdom. Provincial officials enforced royal decrees. Taxation continued despite growing resistance. Courts, ministries, and military structures remained operational. Yet the state had entered a prolonged financial crisis created through decades of war spending, debt accumulation, and uneven taxation. Attempts at reform did not emerge from revolutionary ambition, but from administrative necessity. Ministers including Turgot, Necker, and Calonne proposed revisions to taxation and expenditure in order to stabilize royal finances without dismantling monarchical authority. Each proposal moved through a structure designed to preserve privilege while protecting the image of royal command. Resistance emerged not outside the system first, but inside institutions expected to sustain it. Parlements delayed registration of reforms. Noble factions defended exemptions. The crown continued functioning, but each attempt at correction exposed how limited its room for action had become. At first, the monarchy treated the crisis as temporary imbalance rather than structural constraint. Loans covered deficits that taxation could not. Public confidence became as important as revenue itself. Necker's publication of royal finances in 1781 attempted to reassure creditors that the monarchy remained solvent. Instead, it exposed how dependent authority had become on maintaining perception. The government continued borrowing because admitting the scale of the crisis risked weakening obedience before alternatives existed. Delay, therefore, became embedded inside governance itself. Decisions were measured not only against effectiveness, but against whether the institution could survive the appearance of concession. Provincial administrators, meanwhile, received contradictory instructions. Revenue collection intensified in some districts, while exemptions remained untouched elsewhere. Local officials enforced royal authority without certainty about which policies would survive the next ministerial reversal. Merchants adjusted prices around inconsistent taxation, while rural communities absorbed rising costs without understanding whether shortages reflected policy or harvest failure. Pressure accumulated unevenly. The monarchy still possessed military force, legal authority, and ceremonial legitimacy. But each solution narrowed future flexibility. When Calonne proposed broader land taxation in 1787, he sought approval from the Assembly of Notables rather than immediate enforcement. The decision revealed an important shift inside royal authority. The crown still possessed theoretical absolutism, yet increasingly searched for consent before acting. What appeared cautious was also defensive. The monarchy feared that unilateral reform would provoke resistance it could no longer easily absorb. The Assembly rejected the proposals, not because the financial crisis was disputed, but because accepting reform threatened established hierarchies within the governing structure itself. Authority encountered a familiar institutional problem. Those most capable of approving adaptation were also positioned to lose influence through adaptation. Delay therefore continued even after necessity became obvious. The monarchy responded by dismissing ministers, revising proposals, and attempting partial enforcement through existing courts. Each maneuver preserved immediate continuity while worsening long-term rigidity. The conflict with the Parlement deepened this pattern. These regional courts framed themselves as defenders of constitutional tradition against arbitrary power, yet they also protected aristocratic privilege. The Crown attempted to compel registration of reforms through royal sessions known as lites de justice. Legally, the monarchy still prevailed. Administratively, the victory proved weaker. Enforcement increasingly depended on displays of authority rather than routine acceptance. Institutions remained operational, but more energy was spent compelling cooperation that had once been assumed. Inside Versailles, uncertainty narrowed decision-making further. Advisors disagreed not only about policy, but about how much instability the public could safely observe. Financial disclosure risked panic. Tax reform risked elite resistance. Spending reductions risked weakening patronage networks that sustained loyalty around the court. The monarchy therefore oscillated between limited reform and symbolic reaffirmation of authority. Reaction slowed because every available response threatened another part of the structure required to govern. In provincial towns, officials delayed implementation of unpopular directives while waiting for clarification from Paris. Creditors demanded repayment schedules that ministries could not reliably provide. Grain shortages intensified local anxiety, even where unrest had not yet emerged. Administrative hesitation spread outward long before revolutionary organization became dominant. By 1788, the monarchy confronted pressures it could no longer isolate financially. Severe weather damaged harvests. Revenue declined while debt obligations increased. Attempts to suspend payments damaged confidence further. Yet, even then, the state did not move toward surrender or disappearance. Instead, it searched for broader legitimacy, while preserving monarchical continuity. The decision to convene the Estates General for the first time since 1614 was not initially conceived as abandonment of royal authority. It was an effort to stabilize it by redistributing responsibility for reform across the kingdom's social orders. But the mechanism introduced new pressures the monarchy could not fully control. Once representation became part of governance, expectations expanded faster than administrative adaptation. Questions emerged about voting procedures, authority within the assembly, and the relationship between royal command and national representation. The Crown continued issuing decrees. Ministers continued operating. Soldiers remained under command. Yet the pace of events began exceeding the monarchy's ability to define them. Court factions disagreed over whether firmness or concession would better preserve legitimacy. Some urged decisive enforcement before disorder spread further. Others feared coercion would destroy the remaining confidence necessary for financial recovery. The monarchy alternated between accommodation and resistance, not because it lacked power entirely, but because it no longer trusted the consequences of using power directly. Authority remained intact enough to act, yet increasingly uncertain about which actions would preserve obedience rather than accelerate resistance. In Paris, rumors often moved faster than official communication. Municipal authorities prepared for disturbances without clear guidance from the center. Soldiers stationed near the capital waited for orders that changed repeatedly as ministers rose and fell around the king. Even as tensions intensified, many within the monarchy still believed recovery remained possible. Royal authority had survived previous crises. Administrative institutions continued functioning. Much of the countryside remained quiet. The language of reform still existed alongside the language of loyalty. What narrowed was not control alone, but confidence in the system's ability to respond without weakening itself further. Each delay protected continuity for another week, another season, another ministry. Yet the accumulation of delayed reaction gradually transformed governance into management of pressure rather than resolution of it. And this is often how institutions approach their limits, not through sudden blindness, but through prolonged recognition without sufficient adaptation. The machinery continues moving, documents are processed, orders are issued, ceremonies of authority remain visible enough to sustain belief. Yet response becomes slower than the conditions requiring it. Inside the structure, officials continue searching for the precise adjustment that might restore stability without surrendering legitimacy. Outside it, uncertainty spreads quietly through those still expected to comply. The tension remains because authority is still standing. The ministries have not vanished. The ruler still governs. The institution continues operating with enough strength to delay recognition of how narrow its remaining choices have become. And within that continued motion, reaction itself begins arriving too late to recover the flexibility already lost. If this reflection resonated with you, you can find more explorations like this on Timeless Questions, where history, power, and human nature quietly intersect.